a plot is underway to remove masterpieces worth millions from Britain's biggest galleries. And replace them with freshly painted fakes. It's one of the boldest swindles in art history. The fakes will be hidden in plain sight amongst the country's most important collections. Will anybody spot the fakes? Somewhere in Cornwall, a 20th century masterpiece is being meticulously copied as part of an astonishing experiment.
It is a challenge. You've really got to be deceptive.
It's going to hang in place of the real thing in one of our public galleries. A fake among originals.
I'm driven for it to be the best. If everybody said, oh yeah, that's the copy, that would be my nightmare.
£70,000.
The art market is flourishing, but the constant demand for new works has created fertile ground for the art forger.
I can do everyone.
Picasso.
Oh, Picasso.
For years, Henty sold his forged artworks on eBay, earning himself well over £500,000.
Some estimates put the number of fakes in circulation at between 50 and 70% of the market.
People are being deceived by these things where they're not recognised.
It's a unique collection of art. Unique because all of it is fake.
And there are some artists who appear particularly vulnerable to forgery.
A £70,000 Lowry painting backed up with an artist's letter.
But just how easy is it to fool people with a fake? Over the course of 1 month, we're setting out to discover how closely people really look at art. We've planted fakes in 7 of the country's most important art collections and asked the public to hunt them out.
It's behind glass, so you can't find if there's any fresh linseed or oil.
Seen that there, Gil? That looks like it's drying out there, doesn't it?
In the process, shining a light on what makes a masterpiece.
I love this painting.
Or maybe it's a fake.
Or maybe it's a fake.
And asking, what is the replica of a great painting worth?
That's come from Woolworths, that one, hasn't it?
The Manchester Art Gallery is a product of the astonishing wealth generated by 19th century Manchester's booming textile industry. This place houses more than 13,000 works of fine art collected over 200 years, but someone has had the gall to replace one of them with a fake. Now, who on earth would do a thing like that? The fake is one of these 10 urban landscapes. They are the work of just 2 artists. The most popular British artist of the 20th century, L.S. Lowry, and the man who inspired him, Adolphe Valette. Between them, they have come to define Manchester on canvas, revealing the city and its people in a totally new way. Susie Ray is one of the country's leading copyists. She begins the painstaking task of faking one of Manchester's masterpieces by visiting the gallery on a covert mission to examine its collection.
Let's have a look.
Down to the vaults to study the stacks of artworks yet to be displayed and decide which to copy in her bid to fool the public.
It's a really lovely painting. It's so much more delicate than I thought.
For 25 years, Susie's been replicating original works with such precision that they can't be distinguished from the genuine painting.
He's used a variety of colours where he's got yellows and blues.
But until now, she's never deliberately set out to fake a painting.
My paintings are not forgeries, they are my copies. So although from the front it will be aged and the artist's signature will be on the front, but on the back you'll see that the canvas is brand new and that I sign my name on the back, so that there is no intention to deceive. I really don't want to go to prison.
But even though her works are clearly marked, their purpose is to appear original.
I have a lot of high-profile clients and they might be selling one or two pieces discreetly, and so they'll get me to do a copy and then that will sit back on their wall and nobody will know.
Back at her Cornish studio, to execute the perfect copy, Susie will meticulously recreate her chosen artist's techniques, including his use of lead paint.
Here I have, I think it's the white paint that I managed to track down. Yeah, oh my God, it's really heavy. This is a flake white paint that is discontinued. It's been discontinued for many, many years because it has lead in it. So I'm dying to open it to see if, obviously, the paint will come out and see what the consistency is like. Oh, yeah, that is quite stiff, but that's good. You can buy modern substitutes without the lead, but the paint is a lot softer, and I want to make it, as authentic as possible. This is going to be a bit of a shame. There's tiny flecks of sand in the paint. Yeah, I think I'm not going to be able to use it, but I did at least find out that it's this thick consistency. Back to the drawing board. This is Georgian white. This one is the nearest that I know of that is consistent.
At Manchester Art Gallery, the doors are opening. Now surely, in a city so proud of its artistic heritage, they'll be able to spot the fake lurking amongst their most famous paintings.
We'll easily spot the fake because I'll follow him, so whatever.
And I'll follow him. The blind leading the blind, it'll be okay.
Yeah. That's certainly one of his dogs.
If we can't find the dog in one of them, that'll be the fake.
We're not experts, just students trying to spot the fake, but details is what we're looking for. Cracks, the paints.
Yeah, the cracks. Yay!
I think it's going to be quite difficult. I don't think I'll get it right. But maybe with scallops, you'll see through things that I overthink. Maybe like the kind of emperor's clothing.
That's orange.
Our fake is either one of these misty, atmospheric views of Manchester by Valette, or one of Lowry's celebrated scenes of working-class life. Framed by the city's mills and terraced houses, and its sometimes desolate districts. But one of these urban landscapes is a fake. Can you spot it? Across the nation, a hunt is underway to find the fake paintings concealed in our greatest public galleries. And in Manchester, there's a counterfeit painting hanging in a collection of urban landscapes by L.S. Lowry and the man who taught him to paint, Adolphe Valette.
An accident. Ah.
It was a case of a woman found drowned.
Oh.
She's done well to drown in that puddle.
Key to seeing through the deception is understanding the techniques behind the originals. And someone who can distinguish between clever forgery and the real thing is art historian Rose Balston. It's very exciting to be surrounded by urban landscapes, and most landscape paintings are of the countryside.
Well, there's always been a history of urban landscapes. I mean, I guess the artist who really sort of drove the genre forward was Canaletto in Venice in the 18th century.
Before him, was it just countryside that people...
No, not at all. No, probably the very first urban landscape was painted by the Lorenzetti brothers in Siena. But really, it was Canaletto who took the genre and ran with it, and his style was so popular. Then the impressionist artists in France took it again a little bit further, painting the modern city, the new types of industry, whether it was railway stations or new bridges.
Canaletto painted Venice. These are paintings of Manchester, which was not built just with beauty in mind. mind. It's an industrial city.
That's what makes these paintings so interesting. So Lowry's master was a guy called Villette, who came from France in 1904, and he brought the impressionist ideas to Manchester and started creating a whole series of paintings that actually celebrate the beauty of Manchester. Villette became master of drawing and painting at Manchester School of Art in 1905, and for the next decade, the city was his subject. Villette's canvases are powerful studies of the industrial architecture of the city, permanently suffused with smog. He was Lowry's teacher for 10 years, and looking at his hardly discernible figures hurrying through the gloom, his influence is clear.
It's on the Irwell, isn't it? Because it's always foggy there. I mean, it's not so foggy nowadays, but when it was all coal fires and everything...
It was murky.
It was terrible.
You can almost taste the smog and the cold.
I think it was like that, very factory-ish and smokish, so I reckon he's used the right colours, me.
It's done all very pebbly, stony colours, isn't it? Very beiges and layer upon layer, which is really clever.
Yeah. It's a bit sort of Monet-like, when Monet was going blind and couldn't see very well. That's
Kay, Pat, Angela and Leslie are friends who have known each other for over 40 years.
Coming from Manchester, you know, being Lancashire people, we have memories of our grandparents in these sort of situations.
It is still quite smudgy and sludgy, isn't it?
I like his smudgy, sludgy style. They're not easy colours to get, you know.
Is it raining, or is that just his technique?
I think it's a bit of both, actually. I think what Villette wants to capture here is that sort of smoggy feel of Manchester, but also it's the fabulous kind of impressionist technique where he's drawing down the brushstrokes. It's almost like kind of drawn-out pointillism.
Pointillism being just dots?
Yeah, exactly, dots.
Is there a word for this one? Smudgelism?
Smudgelism will do, I think.
Okay.
Thanks, Charles.
It's like a close-up of a detail of a Lowry, isn't it? These people with quite clumpy shoes and no features on their faces.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you start looking at the people, you can begin to see what kind of effect Villette had on Lowry.
So this is so Lowry, actually.
I thought that was a woman.
Do you think that's a woman?
Yeah, it's a woman.
Really?
I'm pretty sure it's a woman.
Because it's so blurry.
No faces.
No face?
Yeah.
Because that's probably some reason for that. Everyone has their own life to lead, don't they? Everyone's busy doing their own thing, whether that's a busy mother or the working man on his way to the mill.
It's almost as though it's always rush hour. Our parents lived in homes like this, the terrace houses. The stories they told us, cockroaches running up the walls, and the conditions were really, really, really bad.
People were very severe with each other. You had to soapstone your front steps.
Yes. And Lowry had an understanding of all this, and when he does it, not particularly this picture, but he always portrays, doesn't he?
It's that northern pride,
that northern pride that comes through.
Yeah, I think with Lowry, he caught like a time where it was about Manchester and people were proud to be from the area. Like, I suppose people are proud of the Beatles in Liverpool. Yeah. Lowry's kind of like of that ilk.
Adam's an amateur artist who's brought his old school friend Gareth with him to try to spot the fake.
All seems about how industrious Manchester is.
Yeah.
And sometimes a bit dull, sometimes a bit drab, but you know, it's full of life, isn't it? It's vibrant.
When Lawrence Stephen Lowry was born in 1887, industrial Manchester was at its zenith. Dubbed the workshop of the world, in less than a century the city had grown to become the third most populous in Britain. But its living and working conditions were also amongst the worst in the world. By contrast, Lowry spent his childhood in Rosham, a prosperous suburb of Manchester. He studied art at evening classes, crediting his teacher, Adolphe Villette, with inspiring him with impressionist ideas. In 1909, his father lost his job, and the family were forced to move to Pendlebury, near Salford. At first, Lowry hated the grime of the factories, with their chimneys belching smoke, but it was a landscape that would come to obsess him. It was in Salford's mills and the people who worked there that he finally found his subject, and for the rest of his life he would paint the scenes on his doorstep.
Few artists can claim such a close relationship with the city in which they live.
I think Lowry's definitely put like a magnifying glass on Manchester for the rest of the world to look in and see
Now the man who tramped its streets is himself woven into the architecture of the city.
There's pubs in Manchester with the bronze statue of him.
Yeah.
But you go and have a pint, stood next to him and the lights. There's always people who know a story or know somebody who knows somebody who knew Lowry.
I actually met him on the bus once. You know, a free spirit.
My parents knew him. He used to call in for cups of tea and he used to draw for the kids and that on the back of an envelope and they never kept any of it, unfortunately.
These two look to me like what I think of as a Lowry painting. They look very similar.
Yeah, I mean, they're classic Lowry, these ones. They've got all of those Lowry components. We've got the teeming groups of people. We've got the mills. We've got those kind of grey Mancunian skies. In An Accident, Lowry was depicting a woman who had committed suicide. She'd thrown herself into a canal. And can we actually see that woman?
I can't.
No, you can't, can you? All you can see is the crowd and this feeling of kind of curiosity. Almost in a way as though Lowry's suggesting this is part of the everyday entertainment of life.
It's classic rubbernecking though, isn't it? They're coming from all over. The 2 years between the paintings see a subtle change in the palette.
In this one, we've got a little bit more kind of pearliness of tone, more like what Villette was using when he was teaching Lowry. It's not so strongly outlined.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at that one, this is when Lowry in 1928 was really starting to kind of develop his own unique style, quite heavily outlined. He used white much more as a strong background for these dark figures.
In Cornwall, Susie has begun the daunting task of replicating a masterpiece.
The undercoat, being thickly applied, is one of the key elements to this painting. The whole point is to build up the textures and then overwork them in areas where he's got thick layers of paint.
As important as achieving the right texture is perfecting the colours.
This is where it gets a bit fun because this artist only used 5 colours and he just mixed these up and got these fantastic subtle tones.
Vermilion, yellow ochre, Prussian blue, ivory black and white make up the restricted palette of colours which, blended, could produce myriad shades.
In some of his paintings there's the most amazing pinks and things and they have an impressionist feel to them. And then of course the subtle tones of the greys and the blacks. There's warm greys, white greys, cold greys, because it's an industrial scene, so it's kind of dirty, there's smoke, smog. It's not until you actually see it hanging and you just see how incredibly beautiful actually the painting is.
He's brought the Matchstick dogs in there, though, hasn't he?
Yeah.
But for some, Lowry's paintings are more naive than beautiful.
It's just blocks of colour. There's no detail in the faces.
I think that was the magic of it, was that it looked like a lot of stick figures and people were drawn into that because people like little matchbox houses and matchbox people.
Lowry's one of those painters who divides people. I've often thought his figures aren't very good. They're a bit doll-like.
Lots of people have called Lowry's figures the Matchstick men. But I personally feel that when I look at Lowry paintings, you do feel like you can kind of attach a character to his figures. And even though they are rather doll-like in a way, you're right, they still are teeming with personality and character.
There's a story happening here, there's a story happening here, they're having an argument.
Ian allowed out because he had an injury at karate.
He's still got his karate.
Yeah.
He's on his way home from work.
She looks well angry. She looks like she's fuming.
Hi there, ladies.
Oh, hi.
Have you found anything with your magnifying glasses?
Oh, I think that's my granddad.
I can see the...
Oh, great, Grandma.
I mean, were they real people that he was painting, or was he just doing figures?
Of course they were.
Here,
Everyone is a character.
He's got the grandma going back in. She's shouting to this girl, "Come on, Mary, stop looking, because there's somebody who's just killed himself."
Is she, or is she saying getting more people out of that house? Come and have a look.
No, she's not. She's going in to say, "Come on, Mary, you're too young to be out there."
Do you think? And what about his very, very stylised way of painting? It makes him very popular to some people, but also to some art critics, they don't like it.
But don't you think, just from a couple of strokes, he can convey a character and a movement? And that, to me, is how clever he is.
Lowry's ability to fill his paintings with incident is part of his broad appeal. not least for school children, who come to study his techniques at the Lowry Centre in Salford.
Have we got any football fans in? Do you know who Lowry's favourite football team was? Yes.
Salford.
No.
Manchester City.
Manchester City. He was a Manchester City fan.
Lowry consistently failed his life drawing classes, but he had a unique facility to imbue his figures with life.
Sometimes people come into this gallery and there's only one thing they know about Lowry, that he draws matchstock figures.
Lowry had an incredible sensitivity to the way people held themselves. Now, he had a limited repertoire of movements that he used. Mr. Lowry's a limited artist, but he takes that very awkwardness and just makes poetry out of it.
So their heads are kind of bowed down and their backs are curved and their feet are made to look really heavy. So if you see that shape, does that person look happy?
No.
Do they look a bit tired?
Yeah.
Lowry was intent on painting the humdrum daily life of the city in which he lived.
Mr. Lowry was a rent collector. He travelled the city streets of Manchester and Salford. His idea of fun on a Saturday night was walking up to Bolton and back again. So he looked at people, and as a rent collector, he would have known people's body language. He had a number of stock forms that he would use, but each one of them, I think, has a special magic. He has the little girl, and he has, of course, himself. He paints himself into everything he ever painted.
Have you noticed there's something that you might want to see in the sky that isn't there?
Sun.
The sun? Have you noticed when you look at Lowry pictures, there's no sun?
When people say about Mr. Lowry's paintings, why haven't they got shadows? Look at a lot of painters who go after iconic simplicity, and you'll realise that shadows muck up a composition. And also, this is Manchester Salford. There's no sun. And instead of that, what you tend to have here is the light, when the sun sets, comes across the Lancashire plain. It's caught between a low cloud base and the damp, humid streets. And you get a box of light. It illuminates in a gentle embracing of the whole landscape. And that's what Mr. Lowry paints.
The flatness of Lowry's compositions have been likened to stage sets. As Lowry began to paint groups of people in more detail, we see a sometimes savage comedy.
He had a very fatalistic view upon humanity. He found it endlessly funny, but it's a black, Samuel Beckett-like humour. He said once, there's nothing more funny than seeing somebody run for a train and miss it.
What is going on with that face? That's just... It is very sinister. It looks a little bit like Oswald Mosley.
Apparently the vicar objected to it. This is very different. With the others, he's capturing everyday life. With this one, he's capturing pomposity.
This painting depicts an actual event, the laying of a foundation stone for a new school.
They're all full of their own importance. They're bored out of their minds, and he's spouting off about rubbish.
But its mocking tone upset the Salford City Fathers.
Lowry's using his wit here. I mean, it's really quite funny, this, actually. The school children look utterly bored. We've got almost kind of caricatures here. Now, we seldom see faces and features in Lowry paintings, but here we've actually properly got some faces, and some of them are marvellous. I love these two blokes down here, one with the most enormous chin and one who's completely chinless.
This fellow is sort of beautifully rendered. You've got cheekbone, ears, his bald head, quite a delicate nose. But this policeman, I mean, that's rubbish.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at the Lord Mayor as well, that's pretty rubbish as well.
Right, he's just...
So perhaps he's kind of having a stab at the establishment, perhaps. The policeman's no good, the Lord Mayor's no good.
There's a lot of scope for mistakes on this one, isn't there?
There is.
Because so many people on it, and
There is. So you've got to be on top of your game if you're going to forge one of these.
In the country's most prestigious public galleries, an audacious fraud has been underway for over a month. In the place of original paintings, 7 fakes hang instead. And there's one right here, among the urban landscapes, by Manchester's most famous painter, L.S. Lowry, and his tutor, Adolphe Valette, whose vistas are still recognisable today.
We've just walked through there. We're parked next to it.
Oh, right. I know Irwell Bridge very well. Not that my mum would like to know. When we were kids, used to jump off there into the River Irwell. Unless this is the fake, this would be harder to paint than a Lowry.
All right.
So someone's planted a forgery in our finest gallery.
For Jay and his wife Laura, the gallery's collection of Lowrys is a favourite haunt.
I think it would be extremely difficult to forge a Lowry painting. They look quite simple, but on closer inspection, they're not. I love that. That's that, like, you know, the street scenes, you don't see them anymore. The social media's destroyed it. People don't socialise. Hi.
Hi. What do you make of this one, then?
I love it.
Do you?
I grew up in the 70s, you know, and we all used to socialise out on the street, you know, and in the summer, like, the sun would melt the black tar, you know, the pitch on the road, and we'd pick that and stick lollipop sticks together and make gliders. Every day, everyone will be out on the streets, you know.
Everybody knew everyone's business.
Yeah, the rag and bone man had come down
yeah.
the street, the greengrocer, the butcher.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because if you see a group of people these days, they're all
like that.
So that's what a human looks like. Whereas, obviously,
I've been intending to paint it for a long time, but not got round to it yet.
Are you a painter?
I am an artist, yeah. But I used to be homeless. I grew up in institutions and long-term imprisonment, and I was making a living in prison doing portraits of people's children. So when I come out, I took my canvas and my paints. I went into the city just outside this gallery, and I used to paint for spare change.
Outside this gallery?
Yeah. It bridged the gap. Suddenly people were saying nice things to me for the first time in my life, and it soon saved enough money to rent a small studio in the city. It's completely turned my life around, art.
What about Lowry? Is he one of your big people?
One of my greatest inspirations.
Do you think you could do a good copy of Lowry?
I've painted many Lowrys. They were brilliant sellers. You did a Lowry and it's gone like that.
But you weren't trying to persuade people that they were Lowrys.
No, I sign all my paintings with my thumbprint.
To make it clear that it's you?
I used to get thrown in the dungeons for leaving fingerprints behind, you know what I mean? And I found something that I can leave my fingerprints on in broad daylight and be proud of.
Lowry is one of the most highly collected British artists of the 20th century. A sale of 3 Lowry paintings owned by the late Cilla Black sold for almost £700,000.
Lot 7, family group, Lowry, and 200,000.
His immense collectability makes him highly profitable for fakers.
Thank you very much again.
Billy Mumford and David Henty are both convicted fraudsters living on the south coast.
It's a nice one, isn't it?
The seaside swindlers had been in the art forgery game for a combined 60 years. David's main way of selling his copies was through the internet auction site eBay.
I'd make my own Lowrys up, but I would always put in my advert, there's no paperwork, no provenance, no history. So I'm selling the painting reluctantly. Came from a house clearance in Manchester. Pendlebury, I think it came from. And, but it's strictly sold as after.
This loophole allowed David to sell hundreds, if not thousands, of paintings with no legal comeback.
I've done so many Lowrys, it didn't take very long, about a day and a half. I had a roaring trade for 5 years.
Billy made a career out of faking lesser-known artists.
I used to be a professional art forger and have been for 43 years, until I was brought to book by Scotland Yard. There's a chain at the top of, you know, like a food chain in prison.
Yeah, the Newfangleds.
Yeah, and
the
you know,
ones up.
and at the top of the range are the con men and the fraudsters. So I was very lucky. People used to knock on your cell and ask if you could forge them a day pass to get out. I was like, oh, no, I'm not, you know.
Nowadays, Billy paints just for pleasure. And David has had his first exhibition of replicas of famous paintings, copies rather than fakes.
I don't miss it at all. It's nice to be able to sleep at night. This is much more exciting than forging.
Lowry may be a soft target for forgers, but to fake a genuinely convincing Lowry means mastering his highly intricate and very time-consuming techniques, as our copyist is discovering.
Although they're simplified, they look simple on the surface. They're incredibly complex because of the brushstrokes underneath. What surprised me about Lowry's figures are that they are much more delicate. You know, I always just thought they were just really sort of heavy-handed, you know, basic. But they're so subtle, and the positioning of them is so important, it just works really well. There are not really any faces, there's sometimes just a hint of colour or not at all. But some of them communicate with each other, and it's not until you start painting these that you see how clever this is. There's no sentimentality about them. He's painted them just as he sees them, working people, poor. But there's a charm that I hadn't really noticed before.
By far the most labour-intensive element of this painting is perfecting the way Lowry created texture.
Lowry would put a lot of paint on. It's almost like he's taken the tube and just squeezed it directly onto the board and built it up that way. Because from what I've studied of Lowry, he would rub off a lot of the paint or scrape it off, literally using my finger to smooth the paint a bit. Lowry did have time to do this, and I don't have very much time. So at the moment, I am just literally working in my own little world, really, is what it is. I'm just putting the hours in, and it's pretty slow.
Looks like a bit of a crack house, doesn't it?
Looks a bit grim.
It's grim up north. It's definitely old, though, That's definitely not it.
An island reflects Lowry's growing sense of isolation following the death of his mother in 1939.
It's depressing when you look at this.
You feel the death.
Yeah.
The image of dereliction, almost devoid of people, became a returning theme.
Yeah, I love this one. It's dark.
I like that he says that he has a strong feeling towards decayed houses and deteriorated areas, and that is really at the heart of like what we do, abandoned and derelict buildings.
Hayley and Joy are both street artists.
I think that's why I like this one, because it's really similar to the colours we use.
Yeah. I don't know if that's because we're from a similar area and the weather's rubbish, but I imagine it would have been even more so back then with all the smog.
Where have all the people gone? It looks like the world is broken.
It does. Having a Lowry bereft of people is quite difficult because the people are the sort of beating heart.
You don't realise how important the people are until you miss them.
Exactly. And instead we have this isolated house, and there's a great sort of sense of the solitary building, perhaps representing the solitary man. But again, this is kind of a social, political comment as well, because Manchester was in its absolute golden age at the end of the 19th century, but in the 20th century, things started slipping downhill quite considerably.
For almost 3 months, Susie Ray has been labouring to produce a fake so perfect it will deceive gallery visitors who know and love Lowry.
I've nearly finished the picture. It's been a long haul. I've got small tweaks to do, but it's just maybe colour corrections, tiny little details. The fact that he only used 5 colours has been a discipline for me to work with, but it works. It works really well because it really does capture those sort of earthy tones, the feel of the factories and the workers and things all in sort of dark, dreary clothes, but a little bit of red popping out here or there. I think it's wonderful.
Coming Home from the Mill was painted by Lowry in 1928. During that decade, he started to create composite industrial scenes made from a mix of actual and imagined buildings. Here, the mill workers are not heading into hell. They've got their release.
My respect for Lowry's paintings has changed hugely. They're completely different from some of the bad reproductions that I've seen on jigsaw puzzles or chocolates. This Lowry signature is a nice earthy brown, formal, similar to his style of painting. No frills. It is what it is. It's his name, L.S. Lowry, 1928. And I also always judge paintings like, would I have this on my wall? And I would definitely have this painting on my wall. I think it's that nice.
Moving the canvas to an ambient light gives a new perspective and can show up any flaws.
I'm cautiously optimistic that it does look like a Lowry. These textures that I've spent weeks and weeks and weeks, building up, that it looked as if I was just doing random strokes, but really they weren't. that is how I think it should look, and I'm happy with that. I've spent so many weeks on this. It sounds corny, but it does feel a bit like giving birth. There's no going back. If it's a complete disaster, then there's nothing I can do about it.
In Manchester, it seems as though Susie's creation is holding its own beside the genuine Lowrys.
I think that's real.
Explain why.
That's too carefully painted.
I know that
it's
it is,
too carefully
isn't it?
painted.
Yeah, I think it might be that one, you know.
That's quite a lot sharper, isn't it? That?
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah.
I think that might be a...
I'm quite suspicious of this painting now, as we've been stood here talking.
Really? Tell me why.
The figures, they're really well painted.
You think they're too well painted?
Yeah, this one's even got a face on.
Our fake urban landscape has been hanging in the Manchester Art Gallery for 4 weeks. And the people of the city have been scrutinising art more closely than ever before.
I think it's that one. And check the signatures. The guy hasn't even got his signature right.
Will the fraudulent Lowry have managed to fool the public?
I'm feeling the pressure of it, actually.
God, it's so hard.
I think the foundation one, laying the foundation stone.
The thing that makes me suspicious about that is that face, because it's dissimilar to the level of detail of the others.
This is a fascinating one, isn't it? Because really, nobody's getting it right. The fake is indistinguishable.
The copyist has done such a good job here, and people are baffled. And I think one of the ones that are throwing the public quite a lot is the laying of the foundation stone. It's a lot more cartoony in style, a lot brighter colours, a lot stronger outlines, and you have solid, weighty figures rather than just the matchstick men that people are used to.
But before the fake is unveiled, Susie has arrived to see what gallery visitors make of her Lowry.
Susie, how does it feel to be here, to see your painting up in the room, surrounded by other Lowrys?
It's a bit surreal, really, because obviously this is a first for me. I never see it. Any copies I've done it, hanging in a gallery in the public.
There are so many fakes out there. How easy do you think it is to create a really good copy?
You've just got to spend the time and do a lot of research. I can see why people think, oh, that's really simple. I could do that, or my kid could do that. But it's not going to be convincing.
People are looking at it. Lots of them are walking past it because they don't think it's the copy. So I think it's a really, really good
Thank you. That's brilliant. Thank you.
Susie has managed to deceive almost everyone who's visited the gallery. But can she con the con artists, David Henty and Billy Mumford?
I'll tell you what, Billy, it's quite difficult, isn't it?
So is this it then?
We haven't made our mind up yet. It's more difficult than we thought.
I mean, you would know, wouldn't you, if anyone would? Would you have backed yourselves to get it right?
I think David's done more Lowrys than Lowry.
Literally more than Lowry.
Yeah, probably.
So what are you looking for then? If you're like a faker spotting a faker.
I'd like to have a look at the back.
The back tells you more than the front.
Yeah.
That's the history of the painting.
Whether it's got any stamps on it, where it came from, what date the canvas is, the edges.
And you're good at doing all that, aren't you? All that stuff.
Oh yeah, we've got the old typewriters and the old paper. I think it's possibly that one. I think.
Yeah, I think that sign and this window has been painted to look aged.
Before Susie's fake is revealed, it's decision time. And there was one Lowry that particularly threw people.
The street in Pendlebury. Yes. The people don't seem to have the depth of character.
Don't seem to speak to me
No,
at all.
they don't.
No, it left us all completely cold. Yes.
It did, yeah. I bet we're completely wrong.
We're completely wrong.
They are wrong, but they're not alone. 17% of the public who tried to guess the fake also thought it was Street in Pendlebury.
We're thinking along the lines of the old cab because of the brush strokes. It just doesn't look good at all.
The horse looks like step toes at Austin. It's not that technically spot on, is it?
But they were in the minority, with only 5% opting for Valette, the old cab at All Saints. Our phony Lowry managed to fox all but a few.
Coming home from the mill, it stood out from the rest of them.
On a lot of the other ones, you could see he'd done a figure and then brush stroke round it where they'd like trimmed it in. On that one, it looked like the background had been done and then the figure had been placed on top.
You're changing my mind now as well. I believe you.
But it was spotted by under 10% of people, a very convincing result for our faker. The imposter has done its job. And now the genuine coming home from the mill is returning from the vault to take its place once more on the gallery walls. Lowry's original painting of a mill with smoking chimneys and hurrying people was a scene he explored time after time.
I think Susie did amazingly. You fooled 90% of the people who enter the competition, which is pretty amazing. You really can't tell them apart. In fact, I prefer yours.
But can a copy ever compare to the original?
The clouds are a bit greyer.
No, this is the fake. I'm thinking this is the fake. No, that's the fake.
Don't put this on the list.
Oh, that's dirty Salford. That's clean Salford.
Wasn't that amazing? I mean, that was just an amazing fake. 90% of people got it wrong.
Yeah, she did brilliantly well. Because of the fact it was so difficult, people were really looking, and they struggled. You know, it was so difficult.
Forgers, our chap who reckoned he painted more Lowrys than Lowry, got it wrong.
The only difference when you see them side by side now is that the one that Susie did is slightly brighter in tone. It does look very convincing. She's got the figures perfectly, she's got the perspective, the architecture, she's got the mood as well.
I mean, really, it's so good. What's to stop me taking it off the wall and selling it for £1 million?
The police, Charles.
There's some dodgy people there.
Yeah, especially in the art business.
Now I've had a chance to look at them side by side. Yeah, she's picked up all the little nuances, all the little colours. She's got his style down perfectly.
How has the hunt for the imposter honed the public's critical skills?
Now I would be looking at art in a different way, like going into the detail and looking how it was created and wondering how old it is and where it's been for the last how many years.
Been in this gallery many times, but I was looking at everything completely differently, with a purpose this time. Really enjoyed myself.
Yeah, it's been a good day.
Yeah, I think.
Today, Lowry has become one of Britain's best-loved painters. We see his inspiration in a huge Manchester art centre. His work can be found on mugs and tea towels, and his exhibitions are sellouts. He has become the people's artist. With police estimating that Lowry is one of the most faked British artists of all time, Susie's brilliant copy will be bundled out of harm's way, so there's no danger of it entering the market. So this coming home from the mill will now be branded and placed deep in storage. Next time, our fake is concealed amongst the giants of British landscape painting in Cardiff.
These mountains could be the Brecon Beacons.
By Welshman Richard Wilson.
That doesn't sit right.
They look slightly like a Disney princess.
And the master himself, J.M.W. Turner.
Oh, no wonder Turner didn't have a girlfriend.